The U.S. has considered Griner as wrongfully detained since early May, which has many believing she's the latest victim of what is considered hostage diplomacy. Here to help us go in depth on this is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute and an attorney who has worked for both the George W. Bush White House and the Department of Justice, Jamil Jaffer. Thanks so much for being here, Jamil.
Ellie, thanks for having me.
Well, Brittney Griner, her case is just so sad. She's been held in Russia 4.5 months now, but now that her trial has started, she wrote that letter to the president, which clearly indicated that she's scared, and she received a quick response from the White House. Can you explain the dynamics of that, the letter, the response, and how her fear plays into what Russia is likely doing?
Well, Natalie, one of the challenging things about this situation is that Brittney was detained exactly 1 week before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's no accident. It's not like the Russian authorities didn't know that she was coming. She played for a number of years for UMMC Ekaterinburg, a Russian basketball team there in the former Soviet Union. She obviously plays for the Phoenix Mercury here in the United States. She's a two-time Olympic gold medalist. So they knew she was coming. And what they have apparently found on her was these 2 cartridges containing hashish oil, and they're now subjecting her to potentially 10 years in Russian prison. She's already been detained for a number of months. Her detention has been extended at least 6 more months. And so what's clearly going on here is she's being held as a political prisoner, ideally, for the Russians in trade for another Russian or for a step back of U.S. support for Ukraine, neither of which is likely to happen. And so really the question is what is the Biden administration going to do about this, and why has it taken so long? Why did it take till May for them to determine she was a political prisoner? Why did it take till she wrote a letter in June for the president and the vice president to reach out to her family and talk to her wife? I mean, these are the hard questions. Understandably, Natalie, we don't want to, upset the Russians, given that we're already supporting Ukraine. But the idea that we wouldn't work very aggressively to get an American back, particularly an American as proud of Brittney Griner, suggests, a challenge for our own administration.
Yeah, many have questioned, would Tom Brady still be in Russia if he were taken? LeBron James? And we saw the frustration of her friends and supporters and teammates there at that rally tonight. So how much more may or may not be going on behind the scenes, Jamil, in terms of the president's efforts to help her?
Well, Natalie, certainly the Russian government thinks that they have us over a barrel. We haven't taken any real action since February, so it's been a number of months, 4 months, and they clearly know that we're trying to calibrate our response with respect to what we think they're going to do. And so that puts us on our back heels in some ways. So clearly the president's going to be making an effort. He said as much to Brittney Griner's wife, so I think we have to take him at face value. But the problem is the Russians know that they have a valuable asset. They know they're making hay of Brittney Griner being detained. There are other Americans also detained in Russia, like Paul Whelan. And so, we've already indicated with Trevor Reed, who we just got back in April, that we're willing to trade Russian citizens here. The Russians have an arms dealer, Victor Bout, that they'd like to get back. So perhaps that's what they're looking for. But certainly one of the other pieces of pressure they want to put on us is to limit our support for the Ukrainian government, which Russia illegally invaded just 4 months back, a week after Brittney was detained.
Well, you mentioned former Marine Paul Whelan. Let's talk about that. How does her case compare at all to the case of, first of all, Marine Trevor Reed, who was held in Russia for 2 years on what his family considered bogus charges before he was released in a prisoner swap, and then former Marine Paul Whelan. He's been held in Russia for more than 3.5 years and is still there, I believe?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, his family is even more upset. They said they haven't talked to the president yet either. Now that Brittney Griner's gotten sent a letter and she's gotten a response, the question for Paul Whelan's family is, what about our relative? Why hasn't he been spoken to, or why hasn't our family been spoken to by the president? And of course, this goes to a larger issue that our administration has, not just in Russia, but also with Iran, where there are Americans being unlawfully detained that we really needed to go get back. Now, the situation with Iran is different because they're trying to figure out a nuclear deal. The situation with Russia, obviously, we're engaged in the conflict with Ukraine. But at the end of the day, what's clear is the United States cachet on the international scene to get our people back and stand behind our people is clearly waned. And it's not just a problem for the Biden administration. This is a problem that goes back now to multiple prior administrations. And so it's something that the Biden administration needs to take really serious, needs to get in front of, and needs to make clear to countries like Russia and Iran, you cannot detain Americans without significant costs. We haven't yet imposed those costs yet, Natalie, and that's what we need to start doing and really make the Russian leadership and frankly, their people and the people around them feel the pain of detaining Americans unlawfully.
Right. People want to hear more from the president of the United States on this. And I just want to ask you in closing, how worried are you for Brittney Griner?
Well, look, I am quite worried. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that the Russians are charging her with, essentially smuggling marijuana into Russia. It's clear that she's not there to sell these two vape cartridges that she brought in. It's clear they were for, ostensibly if she in fact did possess them for personal use. This isn't the case of some, multiple kilos of cocaine being brought in. And so the idea that she might be subject to 10 years in a Russian prison is simply outrageous. And we know what this is. This is a political ploy by Putin and his regime, engaging in the kind of illegal behavior that they and other governments like Iran have engaged in. We just can't accept this kind of behavior for our adversaries. And we've got to make clear we won't stand for this with American citizens, whether it's Brittney Griner, Paul Whelan, or Trevor Reed.
We certainly hope more is done and it's successful. Thank you so much for joining us with your insights, National Security Institute founder Jamil Jaffer. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.